Well, hello again, and summer has arrived. The hat is out, the shorts are out, and I'm on the beach. So first and foremost, apologies about, oh, I put something on the lens there. Apologies about no film last week. I had plans to go out and then ended up kind of 6.5 hours at accident and emergency at the hospital with my son. So best laid plans. He's fine, but yeah, didn't want to make a film there. So what I'm up to on the beach, I'm heading, and I'm going to deliberately maroon myself on this island here. So I've filmed here before, just off the coast of where I live, West Kirby on the Wirral, and this is the kind of Hilbre Island grouping. So Little Eye, Middle Eye and Hilbre, and there's a reason why everybody else is heading in that direction, and that's because the tide is on the way in. But I'm going to strand myself on Middle Eye and hopefully get some photos of the high tide around Hilbre, but also maybe some birds. I've got my 400mm lens with me, so we'll see how it goes. But beautiful day so far, rain forecast later, so hopefully, touch wood, have the island to myself when the tide is in. See you soon. I thought I'd bring you over onto Hilbre Island. I've got enough time, it's still about 2 hours to high tide, but I've filmed near Hilbre Island before quite a few times, but I don't think I've ever brought you over. So this is Hilbre Island. So the old lifeboat station is there, and kind of behind me there's a couple of buildings and houses, but nobody lives here. There used to, up until maybe 5 years ago, there used to be a ranger lived here, but there's no mains water or electricity, so nobody lives here. But there's a bird observatory, and I've just been stood here watching some seals swim. Tide's coming in, and the guy from the RNLI came round to clear people off the island if they're not staying, because people get caught out. And that's a point I was going to make. If you do come to the island, be prepared if you're going to stay over high tide. There's no shelter, there's no water, there's no cafe, so you've got to bring everything with you, and you're essentially stuck for 6 hours. So if you come out and you're not wanting to stay, make sure you pay attention to the tides. If you come out and you're going to stay, make sure you bring all the right sort of stuff with you. The RNLI guy made a good point as well, because the wind is blowing offshore. The waves look as if they're going that way, so people have been deceived into thinking the tide's going out, but actually it's coming in. So, but anyway, Hilbre Island, and apparently kind of signs of occupation from the Stone Ages. And there's been a lifeboat station, and there's been a church, and there used to be a pub. So in kind of, well, I'll put a link into the history because it's really interesting. But looking like it's going to be quite a decent day. Right, I'm going to make my way over to Middle Eye and get ready for stranding. So, sorry, I told a lie. I thought I'd just come down to the old lifeboat station before I go back onto the island, but give you an idea. So I'm on the old lifeboat, used to launch down that way, but there's just been a seal literally kind of at the end of the launchway, popping its head up, looking at me. So, but anyway, apparently the lifeboat crews used to have to run out here across the sand and then launch, but you can see Middle Eye, that island sticking up there, so that's where I'm going to be. You can still see a couple of people on top, but you can kind of get the idea the tide is sweeping in and kind of does a pincer movement around the island. So I'm going to head over there now, but oh, there's, you probably can't see it, but the seal's just over there looking at me. Yeah, just bobbing up and having a look. So just as those birds fly past. Brilliant. Anyway, so old lifeboat station, and just thought I'd show you something interesting before we finish. Here we go, the old fireplace. So obviously it's been ravaged by time and kind of storms, but there's the old fireplace, which I think, imagine kind of sitting here in a raging gale 9 with a fire going and hoping you don't get a call out. But anyway, over to Middle Eye and a stranding. So I'm off the island and tide is coming in. In fact, feet are going to get wet in a second. So hopefully, I guess this is the start of the process, because the tide will come in further. So I'm just kind of getting my eye in, as it were. But you can see kind of the island, and these rock pools are filling up. I don't know if you can see the kind of waters rushing in there. Just seen. So there's a couple of guys from the RNLI behind me. Just advised 2 people who, t-shirt and shorts, no shoes on, a little dog, going out to the island, and the RNLI guys said, wouldn't recommend it, and they went, yeah, we're going anyway. If they don't get back before this gets cut off, they've got at least 4 hours on the island, and they had no food or water for the dog. So not that worried about them, but idiots. Oh, so anyway, I'll show you the composition and see what I'm working on. So I'll really brighten that so you can see. Got to move quickly because look, the water's coming in really quick. So quite simple. Got the island on my horizon. Got these leading lines, which are these rocks coming in. I've got the polarizer on. I'm just going to underexpose a little bit. So I'm on f16, 30th of a second, and hopefully that turns out all right. I'm actually, there's probably a little bit too much water here now. So when just before I started talking to you, these weren't filled up. So there was a bit more interest in the seaweed and the rocks. So I'm going to have to keep moving. But that's the nature of kind of the tide coming in. I'll just keep hopping up along the tide. But the plan is to kind of show Hilberry Island with the sea. But look, so the water's maybe 3 inches up my tripod already, and that's in 10 minutes. The tide moves really quickly, so if you come, be careful. So going to look for some more compositions. I'm just looking over there, there's a nice rock pool, so I'm going to try that. But as the tide advances, I'll be retreating and eventually probably end up on middle eye there. Right, see you soon. Well, the tide is really rushing in now. Not sure if you'd be able to make it out, but the top of there's kind of a in fact I made a film down there about hyperfocal distance. Just down there there's a series of rock pools which are at a lower level. It's kind of a step down, but the tide has just breached the top of there, so it's absolutely gushing in, and it's coming in there. And yet I've still seen just 2 people went past with just shorts and t-shirts on onto the island. And the weather forecast, although it looks lovely at the moment, weather forecast for 4 o'clock is rain, and they'll be stuck there until after 4 o'clock. So good luck to them. Anyway, what am I up to now? I'm using this rock pool, so see this big rock pool in front of me, as a leading line. So it's coming, I'll show you in a second the framing, but it's coming from the kind of bottom right hand corner of my frame and then leading round and shooting right to Hilberry Island. So I think the composition is pretty good, but I'll show you. So here's I'm not sure you can see, here's the rock pool starts here, but I've put Hilberry Island right on the intersection of a rule of thirds. So very little sky in this image, because I want it to be all about this rock pool and the leading line. So I don't want much sky in the image, I want it to be about the beach. I'll take an image now, but what I'm hoping is that as gosh, it's really filling up, as the tide fills that up a bit, some of those rocks become a little bit more like islands, so you get a nicer kind of sense of isolation. Hopefully that's the plan. So probably got to wait another 10 or 15 minutes, but yeah, spectacular. Where I was before was under about a foot of water already. So loving it. Got my suntan lotion on as well, so the legs are getting a good outing. Well, if people weren't planning on staying on Hilberry Island, they've got a pub with it now, cut off. So tide has just shot in. So, well, I showed you a couple of seconds ago. Gone, overwhelmed by the tide, and I was down here and I've had to raise. It's still about an hour and a half before high tide, so get an idea, but this is what I was hoping. So I'll have to move quickly because the tide will change the image quite quickly. So let's see what we've got here. So got the island up on this rule of thirds here. I might actually just drop that down a little bit. And I've got these rocks racing round to the island. So I'm going to expose for the sky, and reason I'm exposing for the sky is there's quite similar, you know, there's a lot of similarity between the sky and the water at the moment. It's kind of similar exposure. So I've exposed for the sky, probably take care of the water at the same time, and then leave these rocks nicely exposed because the sun is behind me, more or less. It's kind of over my left shoulder. So the sun is shining on those rocks. But I'm hoping what I've got is a composition that comes from the right-hand side and sweeps up. Again, I'll try and show you, but it's one of those days. So the rocks start right down here and like that, shoot up into that quadrant. Is that right phrase? Quadrant, right word? But circumstances like this, you've got to move quickly because the rocks will disappear. So you can't spend time kind of dilly-dallying. Get your composition, take. You know, already kind of the further rocks have disappeared. But I am absolutely on my own. I think there's a few people on Wimberley Island. Don't think there's anybody on Middle Eye, so good. And just if you do come out and you want to stay over high tide, check the tide times, but also you've got to ideally be out here 3 hours before high tide, and you can't start heading back until 2 hours after high tide. So today, for example, high tide is 3:30. I set out at 12:30. I won't be setting back until 5:30, 6 o'clock. So it's, you know, it's a 6 hour kind of trip. And soon, as the beaches disappear, birds will start to arrive because there's nowhere for them to go. So, oh, there's a shell duck just out there. And oh, there's a seal. So spectacular. Just lucky to have this place close by. So I don't know if you'll be able to see the speed of the water shooting through there. I don't know if the GoPro will show that up. Oh, let me try something. See if you can see through my sunglasses. Don't know if that'll work. Does that have a polarizing effect on the water? I don't know. But you never know. Right, looking for more compositions. See you soon. Well, I've walked the length of the island, which isn't very far. It's about 200 yards maybe. But I think it's fair to say I'm cut off and alone. There's nobody else on the island. I've walked the length, looked around the sides. I'm the only one on here. So it's a couple of people on Wimberley Island. It's maybe half a dozen people on Wimberley Island when I came off, and they've not come past me, so they must still be there. But look, just to prove, tide is all around. It's still about an hour till high tide. If I was desperate, I could probably still wade to Little Eye, because it'd only be kind of calf deep. But I'm not desperate. In fact, there's something about being the only person on the island that's kind of really exciting, and I'm enjoying it. So I'm going to walk back along the island and get back to my. I left my camera gear all at the other end. Not seen as many birds as I would have thought. Partly because I guess it's the time of year when lots of them have kind of headed off north. But it's still not yet high tide. There's quite a lot of just on the rocks over there. There's quite a lot of cormorants and things like that, but not as many waders as I would have expected. I've seen a couple of rock doves. Might have got a picture. Got my 400 lens out, but I didn't want to disturb it, so it's probably here for a rest. So I got as close as I dared, took a couple of images, and then retreated. So you know, I don't want to send a bird that's resting on the island with nowhere else to go into a panic and exhausting itself. So took a couple of quick images and then left it alone. But yeah, this is Middle Eye. The RNLI guy said you don't get many people over tiding on Middle Eye because there's not as much shelter, so there's no walls or buildings or anything. We're on Hilberry, because there is quite a wind blowing. There are a couple of walls, as hopefully you saw. You could go into the lifeboat station, stuff like that, but I'd rather be here than on there. So anyway, go and have a drink and eat my donuts. Ooh, I feel like something bit me on the leg as well. Must be summer. I'll move quickly on this one because my foreground interest is quickly disappearing. So there's these two rocks here, and I'm trying to get a composition with the rocks in the foreground and Hilberry in the distance. But I've gone low, and the reason I've gone low is because when you're up high, those rocks are in the foreground, Hilberry's in the distance, and there's nothing in the mid-ground. But if you go low, I'll try and show you, you kind of eliminate the issue of the mid-ground because the rocks move up a little bit. My feet are getting wet. So the rocks are just touching the rule of thirds down here, and Hilberry's on the other rule of thirds. So got to underexpose. I've gone to f22, not for depth of field, but I was just hoping, it's probably a pointless hope. Right, I've got to move because my feet are underwater. Oh, I'm getting cut off. So not for depth of field, but the hope that I get, sorry, I just got to sort my camera to fall in. Sorry about that. Wanted to see if I could get a little bit of a slower shutter speed. Now I could have run back and got a filter and then run back again, but as you can see, where I was standing is now underwater, so that was never going to, you know, by the time I got there and back again, it would have been too late. So I went f22. Filter would have been better, but that opportunity is now gone. So how many times have I said now? I am loving this, absolutely loving it. It's just spectacular. I only live over there, so I'm, as the crow flies, maybe a mile from home, but could be a million miles away, all by myself. Apart from the seals and the birds and the crabs and everything, but you know what I mean. And now it's high tide. So, well, high tide was a few minutes ago, but I was down the other end of the island. So high tide from here on in, it's all downhill, as they say. So there's a bunch of dunlin down on the just the last spit down there, but I'm not going to disturb them because it really they're having a little fly around. It annoys me when people disturb the birds at high tide because they're roosting. It's a bit like me coming into your bedroom at kind of 1 o'clock in the morning and waking you up. You wouldn't like it, and for them it can be a matter of life and death. So, but anyway, what am I doing now? I'm just taking a photograph of the island surrounded by water, and it won't be the most kind of artistic or kind of photographically pleasing. It's a really simple island in the middle, bit of the spit of middle eye there. But why am I taking it if it's not interesting? I'm taking it because I'm going to put it on my stock images website, so it'll get uploaded to stock images because it's just an image of Hilberry Island, and Hilberry Island surrounded by water. So it sounds obvious, but if someone Googles Hilberry Island and they just want a, you know, like a textbook or, you know, some publication that just, you know, maybe someone's writing the history of Hilberry Island and they want an image that isn't arty, just shows the island surrounded by water on a day with blue sky. So that's what that's for. It's the least challenging, least technical image, but you never know, it might be the most saleable. So certainly for you know, the ones I took down with the rock pools and kind of leading lines and nice rocks and flow and all that type of stuff, they are very unlikely to be in a textbook because it's too arty, but that sort of stuff end up in a textbook. So I just mentioned that it was high tide. Just a little bit of a recommendation, and I've no affiliation to this app or anything, but I use an app called My Tide Times, and it's really simple when it loads. So it finds your nearest locations, click Hilberry Island, there you go, all the details, high tide, low tide, moon, all, you know, all that type of stuff. So It's a really good app. I use it all the time. So now what happens is the tide turns into reverse. So as the tide recedes, more opportunities might appear. So I'm at least got another 2 hours here because the route back needs to clear. But I'm not complaining. In fact, I kind of tried to circumnavigate the island. I walked down the far end and came around the kind of the coastline. You only get so far. But I did get to a point where I thought, I wouldn't mind living on an island. So, but right, maybe it's because I'm antisocial. Right, off we go. The tide is reversing quite quickly, as it tends to do. So what that means is shots that I took before as the tide was coming in, as the tide is going out, I can go back to the same spot, but it looks completely different. So I was here before, but because the rocks had been uncovered for a good few hours in the sun, they'd all dried out. Now they've been underwater for a good few hours, they're all wet, so it gives a completely different look and feel. So I'm working on a composition that's using these rocks and these pools sweeping towards Wimberley Island. So I'll show you. Oh, here we go. So get that sweep of the pools and the rocks heading to the island, and I'm just taking my reading off the sky for that one. But now I'm going to go down to the rock here when I get there and just take one off the rock as well, just to give me the opportunity, should I need it, I might not need it, to blend those images together. I was on F11 there, I think. Was I on F11? Just double check. Don't want to be telling you a lie. I was on F11. So the advantage as well is because the rock pools are filled up, they're very calm and they drain more slowly. When the tide is coming in, you tend to get kind of there's almost a kind of a moment where the water gets to a level and the rock pool suddenly fills up, and you probably saw that over there when I was taking it when the tide was coming. You get lots of rushing water, but as the tide goes out, the rock pools tend to drain slowly, so you get a calmer feel. So these rock pools here are very calm, they're almost like glass, so you get kind of a bit more calmness. So still got the whole place to myself, and will have for at least another 45 minutes. I have noticed the people who were on Wimberley Island are all gathering near the end of the slipway, and I'm wondering whether they've got a bit kind of stir crazy because they're not appreciated that you've got to spend kind of 4 hours on there. But they all seem, as the tide started to go, they all seem to be chomping at the bit to go. But anyway, I'm now going to try and see if I can get some of the seaweed in, because the wet seaweeds, the same as I just mentioned, dry seaweed isn't as attractive as wet seaweed. So as the tide goes out, you get the before it dries out, you get the damp seaweed with nice reflections and colours. So going to try a bit of that as the tide goes a little bit further. Well, there we go, a day marooned on Little Eye. Well, not quite a whole day. What time did I get out here? About 1 o'clock, and it's 10 past 5, so just over 5 hours, although my path back's not yet cleared, so by the time the tide is out far enough for me to walk back, it'll probably be 5.5 hours, maybe 6, depending on what the path's like. So hope you enjoyed it. Bit different than usual. Hopefully gave you an insight into what happens here. I would kind of just say again, if you come and do it yourself, do check the tide times. Please check the tide times if you're coming out and going back. If you're coming out staying, make sure you've got enough stuff, food and drink and that type of stuff. And you know, the weather can turn quickly, so make sure you've got plenty of stuff to see you through 5-6 hours on Wimberley. And obviously the height of the tide will affect how long you stay here. So today it was about an 8.5 metre tide. you can get up to 10 metre tides here, so obviously another 1.5 metre tide, you're going to be stuck here a bit longer because it's going to take longer to clear. So hope you enjoyed it. I have. It's glorious, and felt like I've owned the island for a while, being here all by myself, but it's time to head home. Curry and a beer, I think, and I'll see you on the next one. See you. Bye.